Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm so excited to be talking to the fantastic Nicole Beharie all about the morning show. And in starting off and kind of talking back about when you first took on the role of Chris in this show, I remember that you had the chance to talk with Gayle King and kind of ask her a lot of questions, and that one of the things that she spoke to you about was the idea of having your emotions on the back burner because your job is to start somebody's day with a segment or giving them news and kind of setting that tone. And so I was interested in, the side of playing Chris and always thinking very specifically about both her public and her private persona, because one of the things I love in your portrayal is they feel very connected to each other. She doesn't become someone entirely different.
Wow, Mara, this is some research, girl. Like that's amazing. Yes, I feel like you're in my journal. You're in my like character journal. Yeah, and the third season, which was my first season, I did have the huge gift because Jen Aniston connected me with of course Jen Aniston, right? It's just like connecting you with these brilliant people, but she connected me with Gayle King, and she did talk a great deal about how it's a privilege to do this kind of work, and especially in her perspective, it's a privilege to be a part of history as it's being made, and to be able to sort of um, depict and share with the community what that actually is and what that meant. And of course, because the show, the way it's written, people are always going through so much. That little bit of advice meant a lot to me because it meant that I wanted Chris to have the same demeanor about things, that like what's happening, and her job, of course, is a privilege and a gift, and she's new in this space in comparison to everyone else. But also in the midst of all the drama and chaos and complexity, um, she would bring like just a little bit of that into like a little bit of the color where I think some of the other characters are, like you said, able to switch it off and be very, very different. She also wasn't really, she's not really built that way. I also just jumping into like um part of like the character analysis or the gift of Chris is she's an athlete, and this season starts with the Olympics. And we actually got to watch the Olympics in real time as we were shooting. It was almost like a parallel situation. And I just feel like the mindset of athletes, runners, swimmers, even the basketball players, like there's so many documentaries and so many events that I watched. And I was just like stealing as much as I could from humans working collectively, but also like pushing their willpower, and then thinking about how much we work. Even as an actor, you work for years and years and years for like one or two moments that really count, like that one film, but for them, it's really like a few seconds. And so I think Chris carries that with her, that sort of, again, back to what Gayle was saying, the privilege of the moment.
And even the facet of her being an athlete, being so central to so much of who she is, that's been part of her identity since childhood. And so one of the really interesting things when we first met her was watching someone who has succeeded at the highest level of their profession
Mm.
and is now in a completely new space and trying to figure out their own footing and sense of identity and who am I going to be within this new environment, and they're learning. And so what has that experience been, and coming back into this season of the show and yourself having more confidence in knowing the character and knowing the show, and also looking at the way that Chris is also in that same space as well.
I mean, I guess there are parallels. That's a great point, Mara. I think she comes back with more confidence, probably way more confidence than I would say I necessarily had. Like she comes back a rock star in this season. She's got like a Barbie, and she's planning on working on the Olympics, which is obviously her dream come true. For me, it's the entire show for me last season was kind of a whirlwind. I was like, wow, I'm in this amazing vehicle. I'm working with some of my favorite actors, tremendous writing, and and then we got a nomination. So I was just like, wait, what is this? Like, what's happening? So for me, it's just like, okay, we got to like keep the quality up, the standards, and hopefully I'm just blessed to be working with Charlotte Stout because she wrote a great season last season, but an amazing season, and really heralded the writers' room in a way that gives everybody something. I personally think this season is really interesting because everyone has so much to do with their arc, but specifically for Chris, she's a little more complicated than I think people expect this season. And I knew that going into the season. I didn't know how it was how she was gonna write it and flesh it out. I don't know if you've seen any of it yet,
I've
but
seen all through episode 9.
oh, okay, yeah. So it gets pretty grimy, sticky, uh tough for Chris. Um, and I think that's really interesting and a huge gift for an actor. I think I forgot what your question was, but I was going somewhere with it. Did I answer your question?
You did, and also, it was making me think about the writing for you last season against this season, and how much Chris's arc this season is really building on things that you've already instilled in her. And, in particular, seeing her on the receiving end of all this social media backlash. She's received trolling and backlash and threats before, after the Roe v. Wade storyline and decision.
Yes.
But this time it's a very different scope because it's something really personal.
Yeah.
And so, how did you look at the way that you wanted that to feel very different to what you played before?
It's really interesting because so much of the conversation on the show is about obviously the audience, like we're serving the audience, and how social media, how AI, how technology is affecting our not only our livelihood, but our mental state, our relationships. And I think in this case, it hits her in a really different way. It hits her much harder. It makes her rethink the priorities in life, whether or not being as public after retiring from the Olympics, from sport, if this particular vocation makes sense for her. And she's sort of questioning all of those things this season, because it's such a personal story that she shares. I don't know if when you're releasing this, I don't know how much I can say
It'll be
actually
after
about.
episode 5, Amari.
It will be after
Yeah.
episode 5. Okay, well, she's okay, good. Well, then I guess I can say that, yeah, to talk about that level of loss and publicly, um, and also get caught, you know, get caught, and that there's her armor and brand that she's been building. And we all know, like, everything right now is like brand, brand, brand. I'm a Luddite. I'm just like not that girl. But Chris is that girl. Like, everything, down to her husband, down to the sweater that she wears, to the interview. All of those things are very calculated. And it's fun to play that, but it's also devastating when you're that calculated and then something goes awry. And so I guess in getting to embody that, it felt like the people who she had garnered their interest and their trust, she let them down ultimately. And not just from when you see her on the morning show, but from before, when she was running, the people that have been rooting for her that entire time. But the other part of that is there's a thing that happens sometimes when you're in the limelight where you don't want to let other people down, and you sacrifice aspects of self. And I think part of the conversation of, like, what happens to the body, what happens to anyone, not just women, but parents, or people in the workplace, as far as your health, your mental health. I've been talking to other journalists, and they're like, you got to get up and go after this, and that they miss a lot. And I think actors know that, but I really feel like anyone in a sort of high profile job, or any kind of job, really knows what that is. So I hope that people can relate to that, even though Chris's situation is very particular to her. It also feels like it's universal in some respect. Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's so many complexities that come forth in that episode, in episode 5. And I remember when you were filming that really pivotal scene where it was Chris and Sybil on last season, where you didn't get the opportunity to rehearse before that, but it was something that was a really helpful tool in being able to kind of find those instincts and emotions in the moment. And so when you were filming the entire sequence, which is a really, really long scene where she goes on Bro Hartman's podcast, did you have a chance to really rehearse that all together? Or was that something where you had to kind of step in the same way?
No, it's not that kind of show. It's a
Yeah.
fast moving show. You do get the text ultimately, like you get your script, and that's your rehearsal. That's sort of your rehearsal. Also think there's so many amazing actors. The way that um Millicent Shelton, who was the director of that episode, shot, everyone was present. Sometimes when you're doing scenes like that, you'll have the people at the table and then the gloves that are totally day and never even see it, right? But everyone was actually present. So time was of the essence, and getting coverage for everyone was of the essence. So it was almost like we were doing it in real time, which is something that happens a lot on the show, actually. Even when Nestor and I were talking about being at the teacup and how it feels like we're actually doing the real thing, because there's a real countdown. There are cameras there. There are the cameras for the show and then the cameras for our show, So it always feels like the stakes are high, even though we know ultimately we might get another chance, or we can, or there may be a cut. But I didn't get a whole bunch of goes at that. As an actor, you talk to a lot of actors. That's tough. My skin even changed a little bit. I got a little red. That's tough because sometimes you're like, I want another one. I want more. So I try to give as much variety as possible. But no, I think it was the gift of having the actors that are just so faithful and present and playful, even in a sort of hard scene. There's still like levels of like playing and tossing things, playing with the phrasing and tossing things around. And I think we were just living in real time. I hope it did service to the material and to what we're talking about. That's to me the most important thing, especially with something as important as this conversation. Again, similar to Roe v. Wade, but about like women's bodies and some of the things that happen with birth, with like a miscarriage, and also medication. What we're doing to sort of push through medication on. Yeah. I have Chris in me was like, I won't even say the word.
I also love with that entire scene that we get to have that moment right before she goes into recording the podcast. And so she gets to see her old teammate Tunde for the first time outside. And, it felt really important to see her apologize, not in front of cameras first. And she does apologize on the podcast again. So with those two apologies, did you want it to feel very linear and connected and very much the same so that there's an authenticity to both of it? Or what were the different ways that you were feeling those moments?
Yeah, I felt like the first apology, they're both sincere, but it's just more personal. Seeing someone she was seeing her for the first time in like decades, you know? Um, and Tunde's played by this a tremendous actress who just dropped in, and you could just see the minute she looked at Chris was just like, you're full of it. And you feel that when someone knows you from the past, or when you got a best family member and they see you differently and you're trying to be new. It's like, you live in New York, right, Mara? People
Yeah.
come to New York and they create new personas and just like new personalities for themselves. And just imagine someone from your past is like, that's not how you talk, uh, that just kind of cuts right through it. And she had to sort of, Chris mentions being 10 toes down with her in the past and how they used to really fight, and that there's like a fighter in her. And I feel like while even doing the scene, I discovered some things about Chris, because you build a whole biography the first season, and then you continue for the writer's room and for the showrunner to add this information. So I'm like, oh, I didn't know this about her. I didn't know. And of course it does build on some of the things that were already established, but I didn't know certain things about her, like where she was from, for me, had shifted once we added this color and this aspect of the story. So we get in this, and it's a public apology. It's still sincere though, but it's just more in the persona that she's built. It's more Chris the brand, versus, you know, Chris the person that she knew when she was 19.
And to your point about how the writing continues to add all these details or give different ideas as to who someone has been in the past, did you feel like in that entire scene that there's parts of Chris that she's kind of forced to confront in herself? Because the fact that her old teammate is like, you've left all of this behind, you don't even want people to know where you're from, and then realizing, okay, you've pissed off a lot of people along the way is something that which is something that she is said to her.
Yeah.
So that's why I have these receipts, and to realize, oh, maybe I haven't been the version of myself all along that I've been telling myself I am. I thought was such an interesting confrontation. And what was that experience for you with her?
Um, I don't think Chris is naive about, like, again, I've been watching these athletes and I know actors too. I mean, like, we know people who get things done. It's not always pretty, you know? So she knows that. I think she probably is just, I think she was shocked that someone would betray the trust. There should have been an incentive to protect her and themselves. I think that's a part of it, but I don't think she's naive as to what, because she's always talking about what the other women are doing, and you know, I think that that's one of the things that Chris and I have in common is like we're like people are capable of anything, which is all the wonderful things on the spectrum and all the dark things on the spectrum. Human beings are like out of here, which is why I love what we do. Um, yeah, so I don't think she feels like she doesn't feel like she's a better person in her mind. She knows exactly who she is, but some parts of it she just doesn't want to share. And that's again one of the great things about this character that's like taught so much to me is like to be an athlete, you have to check in with your machine, almost with your machinery, with your instrument, um, all the time and know where you are every day. So you do have to be very sober and grounded about who you are and what you're after. And that's why you're just seeing a part of her that's like very um adaptable and kind of stealthy and adept, that she can smile through things, but ultimately there's a lot more going on. I think about actually too, I'm going all over the place, but dancers. I went to Juilliard for theater school for college, and some of my friends were dancers, like ballet dancers, modern dancers, and they're so beautiful, and they're like moving through space and then they take off their shoes, and you're like, yikes, bloody, bruised, purple, swollen, bandaged. But it looks like pure elegance and effortlessness, and it's not, And I think that was an inspiration for me. It was like to see the bloody, swollen, tired, hot foot. You know what I mean? When it just looks like, hey, everything's good. Like underneath, it's been hard.
It's such a great analogy, and even what you were just describing in terms of she is aware of these things but doesn't want to say certain things out loud. I wanted to ask about how you feel like that plays into the distinction of the way that the writers have very cleverly written the doping storyline, which is, part of the reveal of it is, yes, I did this, but I did it during this particular time during training, and I had stopped by the time I got to the Olympics, so that accomplishment doesn't feel like it was because of that. And I was interested in how you felt like Chris had maybe compartmentalized or how she rationalized it in her own mind.
Yeah, I think she had a goal that like I couldn't stay where I was, but I couldn't use it for this particular thing. But still inside, I still think because you used it to qualify, it still feels wrong, right? Because you wouldn't have qualified. So that's a tough one. It's a tough one. I don't, it's so personal. I'm like getting upset thinking about it. Yeah, I don't know. We just a lot about that actually, because it actually adjusted.
I mean, also in that scene when she starts talking about the experience of her pregnancy and the loss of her child, it's such an incredible performance and moment
Thank
for you.
you.
And you can kind of feel the complete energy in that room and in that moment completely shift for everybody because
Mm,
nobody expects that either. And, for Chris as well, you can tell it's something that she's really struggled to talk about, and it's a shared thing with her husband, but not something that she really shares in any other way. And I think there's something about hearing someone talk about that for the first time that feels really powerful and really emotional. And so, what felt important to you to try and capture, or how did you find the best way for you to step into it?
wow. Thank you for that question. I'm getting chills like thinking about it. Spoke to people that I love and asked them um, if they, knew anybody or if they had stories themselves, or some people I know who are very vocal and people who, there's actually one friend of mine who was like, actually, and went ahead and told me her story that I never knew. Because people, go through this all the time and then go to work on Monday, you know. And this is someone that's very close to me. So I just thought it was important to give her that space and like allow it to throw her off guard, allow her to just like take off the mask for a second and to remember what it was like to want something so badly. Want the her son want life so badly, and for that to not work, and then also after that real of what happened, she could also lose the other thing that she wanted so badly, and being in that sort of space. The other thing about this that I think is really interesting for the audience, complicated, and I think I didn't actually watch all of the scene work because some of that stuff is like, I just did it and went about my business because it's a little bit heavy. I don't know, it feels strange to watch yourself do that to me. That texture. um but the fact that Marcus, her husband, didn't know, like he knew about the miscarriage but didn't know about, and how hard that is, how that would have been very difficult to hide from him. So like it just informs. I don't think we have a whole lot of space for everything that could have happened between them. We did shoot a little bit more. I know that some of that didn't make it in there, but I hope that it like comes across like what that does to relationships as well. That she, even though they both suffered the loss, she did have an additional weight and sort of like, and her when she felt like she has the best relationship on the show, right? She has like this like fantastic with this man that's really supporting her. But ultimately in that moment, she didn't feel, supported and together. She felt like she had to lie and hide this even from him. And this is the first time he's finding out some of this. So that was just so powerful. And we have a scene actually after the interview where we come together, and uh what happens there was like a little bit of improvisation. We just ended up like holding each other and talking through it a little bit. And I think it got cut down, but I think it still has the sort of core of it and the spine of their relationship and whether or not they'll make it. Because that's a real question after something like that. Um, like you've lied to me this long, you know?
I mean, that scene with her husband after, what we see in that moment in that episode, there's not a single word of dialogue exchange between the two of them, and yet you understand the
Oh,
entire
that's what you say.
conversation that they're having. It's that
Hmm.
action of her kneeling down in front of him, and then the way that you kind of reach up to wipe his tears off his face was one of my most favorite moments in that whole episode.
Oh,
And
wow.
did you have an idea of those actions beforehand, or were those things that you found together as you were filming it?
Yeah, we kind of, it was a little bit like like I was saying, like an improv. there was us going in the room and talking a little bit. And so to answer your question before, if there was rehearsal, this was probably the only time we had a little bit of time to wiggle. There wasn't rehearsal, but it was like, what is what do we do now? Now a huge blow up, you know, or this like a ton of dialogue. And there wasn't. There was a little bit of dialogue. And then we just kept trying different things on the couch, and well, that's not it. Maybe what if, you know? And I think I was sitting on the couch first, and then I was yeah at first coming in and like joining him, and then I was like, no, what if I just come to him? And of course, Chris is apologizing, and so rather than doing it verbally, the physical choice is to sort of, you know, um kowtow, cower, bend, beg, you know, and that's what she does. And then she sees what it cost him, you know, and wants to hold space for him. But also like it's a crazy thing because she just did this thing and then she's right back in this place of taking care, right? Like everything, like she didn't even really get a moment to herself yet to be like, what just happened? So it's really, it was interesting because when I go in the room, I remember, obviously I know I was seeing, I remember that feeling of like, oh, somebody's here
Yeah.
already. Like he's here. I have to deal with this now, you know, so it just tumbles.
And also in talking about Chris's relationship with Mia this season, you know,
Mm,
Mia's always represented this version to Chris almost of this is who I could become if I
oof,
allow the network to change me. And you know, Chris has always been really strong-headed about pushing back and not wanting to change who she is. And now Mia is kind of almost moving back towards the version of herself that she had been. And so they kind of find themselves in even closer alignment. But I love kind of the conversation that they have in the car together after Mia has
mm,
overstepped with the comment about her being a mom. And, you know, Chris isn't immediately forgiving her. You're kind of looking out the window and not listening straight away. But it ultimately ends with the two of them in really close alignment. And so,
yeah.
what did you feel like was important for the two of them to find in each other to create what becomes this really beautiful partnership between the two of them?
Yeah, I felt like Chris realized this season that Mia wasn't on the same page in the way that she had expected at the beginning, but that she was also, unbeknownst to her, like she's proud of her because she is seeing this woman that seems just like a rock, a tree, a mountain, find deciding to do something different. Personally, if I can just take a sidebar, I love what Karen Pittman done this season. I'm a fan of the show. I love the writing for her. I've been watching the show and watching her embody Mia, but sort of like in the back, you know what I mean? And it's really nice to see Mia come forward and take no prisoners and wear the red suit and the red, you know, and get it. And that's like it's so like very rewarding for Chris. Unfortunately, Chris puts her in a predicament where, because of the secret, right, where it jeopardizes everything. So that's the tricky bit. um, but that bond between them of someone who is sort of less willing to bend, and I being also younger and like sort of in a way affecting her. Like I feel like she learned, like she said in the car, some things from Chris and resented things about Chris. And then you see her embody some of them. And then you also see Chris decide to sort of toe the line or use the system a little bit more. So I think I think they feed each other in these really interesting ways. But yeah, even as I'm talking about this, I'm like my take on Chris could be like Chris could be a lot rougher, if that makes sense. She could be played that way, but I think my take on her is similar to I think a lot of people I've seen who are really tough, but they lead with like open arms and smiles, and they just handle all the other stuff in the back, you know. Um, and and Mia is is like that too. But for the first time, you see her just like bite into this thing in a really gorgeous way. And I just, again, I can't say enough about how happy I am to see Karen have so much wonderful work and do such beautiful work.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I feel like the writers also gave you so much great material to work with this season. And it's been so wonderful to see everything that you've done with that in your
Yeah.
performance. So thank you so much, Nicole. Really appreciate it.
Oh, you're so nice. You just flip that back on me. No, yeah, I mean, of course. Well, this is one other thing is that I spoke to Charlotte Stow, our showrunner at the beginning of the season, and she was like, "So what, what are you thinking? Da, da, da. Here's what we're thinking." And I was like, I like it was Chris was so clean last season, and people gave her a lot. But I love that the women on this show are complex, that they have all of the things. And it's like, it would be nice to have a little bit of me. And they gave it to me in spades in ways I was like, wait, no, I don't know about this. This is actually more complexity than I had in mind. But I hope that people enjoy it.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for talking about it all. I really
Thank
appreciate you
you.
taking the
Thank you,
time.
Mara.